Hi, everyone. Welcome to our seventh session or seventh session? Seventh session on the personality of preschoolers. And today we have lots of people with us, and I'm really excited to present to you my colleagues Sarah Clary, Lynne Jacob, Lena Cluston, and Eva Tagostini. So they will introduce themselves.
Well, you should introduce yourself, Valerie.
Oh, should I? Yeah. Well, I'm Valerie. Sorry. I'm Valerie, working at FNEC as a special educational consultant. And so I'm working on that program with all of those beautiful women, I could say. So it's yours. So I will leave the floor. I'm really sorry. My internet is really bad right now. So I'm just going to.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah Clary in Disneycation. I'm working at FNEC as well. I'm a language and culture advisor. Also, I'm working closely with Valérie to bring the First Nation perspective into this workshop with Eva also. My goal is really to learn here with all of us, all of you too, and to be there, try to learn more about what's happening in the art of those little ones in our communities, and then maybe to build our know-how together. So it's always a pleasure to be here.
Pass it to you, Lynne.
Okay, Sego. I'm Lynne Skwanity Jacobs, and I've been invited to be on the panel. Somebody that I used to work with recommended me. Thanks a lot, Cynthia. It's been a real honor just to be a part of this. I've learned so much. So I've been invited because I guess of my experiences at the elementary school where I work, Cattery School in Ganawage. And, started off as a classroom teacher, special education teacher. And then I went into administration, associate principal, gained experiences there, opened my eyes about our community and the needs of the community. And what happens in our school is really just a small, snippet of what's really going on our reservation. So, so I gained a lot of experience there. And then from there, I went into our student support room, which we call the Skanagoa room, which means big piece. And from there, my title is a student support teacher. So my role is when a student is, sent to my room or, brought to me, I do my best to use a holistic approach to ground them, root them, and I bring in the elements of the outside, or I bring them outside to make that connection, and just rooting them back and seeing, what it is that is really troubling them today. I also do yoga as part of a one-on-one session or a small group. So, that balances out the work, because sometimes it can be, one challenge after another when you're working with discipline or social emotional issues. But then the yoga program allows, the spirituality and that type of breath work, meditation, concentration to come in. So, and then I guess, with my cultural background and all the teachings that I gained, just with my own practice in my own way, our own ways, Ganyak Gahaga, and attending ceremonies at the Longhouse. And it was just so nice this past Sunday. We had opening the gardens and seed ceremony. So we actually were able to do some of our seed songs, some dancing, women's dance, because the gardens and seeds are connected to the women, Mother Earth, and the Grandma Moon, the water, everything's connected. And so, we had to sing our songs there. And then we did our great feather dance, the Stoico, I would call that, the creator's dance. So it was nice to be able to hear those songs again, because it's the first time we've done that since March 2020. So it was a real blessing. And then working in the gardens this past weekend, I told my husband, I said, all right, we can plant now. The words and the tobacco has been burned. So it was real awesome. I'm still feeling the energy from it. So, and when we're looking at our children, they're really our seeds, and what kind of garden do we want to have for them? When, they come into our care in our classroom, it's,
yes,
what the love and the, the attention and, the sacredness that we bring to the job, so that we grow, awesome individuals. So.
Thank you, Lynne. A beautiful, beautiful segue into some of what we will be presenting today. I think you'll really appreciate it. So my name is Eva Tagostini. I'm a school psychologist, and I've worked many, many years in the field all across Canada, and also have had the opportunity to work in the northern part of Canada and with some of the Indigenous and First Nations communities. What I'm bringing, of course, and why I've been invited to speak is to bring a developmental theoretical perspective that was created by Dr. Gordon Neufeld, and so I'm part of the Neufeld Institute. And some of you have attended sessions, the first 6 sessions with us, where I've shared some of this very, very profound and rich theoretical framework of looking at children and how they develop. And what's always so heartening to me is how it so connects in with what your communities knew how to do without any theory, without any study, how they just knew what the children needed. And I think I find this theory helps all of us to come back to the roots and to the origins of what it is we are meant to be as the adults who care for children. And so that's very much what our topic is today, especially the particular characteristics of our little ones, our 4-year-olds and our 5-year-olds. And I'm so thrilled to present to you my colleague at the Neufeld Institute, Lynne Clugston. Lynne has done many things in her life, but she has primarily devoted herself to working with young children. And as part of the Neufeld Institute, she is our baby whisperer and our young child whisperer because of the experiences that she's had in the last few years. She's retired now, but just till recently, she has worked in the child care center at Bowdoin College, which is found actually in the United States, in the state of Maine. And she has not only knows the Neufeld theory and the developmental theory and many, many other people, because it isn't just Dr. Neufeld. I mean, there are many very wise people that have pulled together what our young children need. But what Lynne has done is she applies it every day, or applied it every day in her practice. And so she brings an incredible richness of how one can do these things. So welcome, Lynne, to here. And I don't know if you want to add a few little things about yourself that will help people to know you a little better.
Thank you, Eva. Lovely to meet everyone who's up here introducing themselves. And I'm sorry that I can't meet everyone who's also participating. It's a great honor to be asked to be here, especially as I'm not in Canada. It feels like a second home to me, though. I am a mother and have 3 grown children. I also really appreciate the words of Lynne about how we are raising seeds. We are raising from seeds, and it is sacred work. This has always been my perspective. And I have found so much to bring that work to more consciousness and more practice through the work of Gordon Neufeld. So my area is not 4 to 8, but probably birth to 5. However, I'm sure we'll be able to make some of the leaps into application, because I do believe that the picture of the preschooler and getting to know who the preschooler is absolutely changes everything on how we not only view the youngest children, but how we view really all people. So with that, I will say hello and look forward to our discussion today and our talks.
Great. So I will share our screen here. So what we were going to be doing today is really focusing in on the particular uniqueness of these little ones, especially our 4-year-olds and our 5-year-olds, because they are very, very unique personalities. I know that one of our colleagues, Deborah McNamara, says that they are somewhat alien to us. We think we know them because they look like us, and they sometimes can act like us, but they aren't really at this stage. They are not. They are less like us than more like us. And so we're going to just look at some of those particularities, some of those specific things that actually make it a bit of a challenge for us to necessarily understand why they are the way that they are. And Lena, this is a picture of your son when he was a preschooler. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this photo?
Oh, thank you. Yes, this is my son, Stefan. And when I use the word preschooler, I really mean anybody under 7. So just to be clear about that, although we may use it in different ways today. So Stefan is probably 3 in this picture. And I love this because it speaks to what we're going to be looking at today. There's an intensity of focus. He is absolutely working, but it is play. And it has been said that play is the work of childhood. And not only that, it shows his future interests. Stefan is a blacksmith. He works with wood. He carves. He builds. So there you have it. This is why we chose this picture.
Thanks, Lena. So who are these preschoolers? Well, of course, they are delightful, and they're curious, and they're joyful. Just the most, when we are with them, our heart can sing. But they are also very impulsive. They can be quite inconsiderate. They will tell us, things that we don't necessarily want to hear, and will do things that we're really, no, you can't do that. And they are very needy as well. And so what we want to be doing today is really looking at this immaturity and remembering that their immaturity, it's not a mistake. It's not something we have to correct. It's not something we have to, make sure that it gets better. But it's actually a perfect beginning from which we all start. It's just like, and again, many of you have seen these photos. It's like our tomato plant with the pointy yellow flower. It's not a mistake. I don't know why it's pointy and yellow, but we all know that if you just give it the time that it needs, it will turn into a round red fruit. And a gardener has faith in that process, rejoices when they see the pointy yellow flower, and knows with confidence that given the right circumstances, this plant will produce the fruit that we're all looking towards. And of course, as children, the fruit that we're looking for is a mature, lovely, caring adult. And our preschoolers have that within themselves. It's all there. We just have to have an incredible amount of time and patience and guidance from the adults who care for them. And this is really what it's all about. So what is our role as caring adults? Well, we have to lead them. We've got to kind of get them. Sometimes we've got to kind of keep them going on the right path to get out of trouble, but not necessarily to change them, to guide them, but also to provide safety and comfort, to shield them, to give them the time to get used to this world that is so new to them, that they have so much to learn for, and just to give them that time and that space. We have to understand who they are developmentally, because when we understand who they are, then we're not going to become urgent and feel that we have to do certain things, but we can just accept and go with it and take the time, because we know they are on the path they need to be on. And so our job is to create the conditions for them to thrive. So we're going to look today at some of the things that maybe we could get a little bit stuck on, so that we understand, so that we are more willing and able to provide the conditions that are needed. There are some things we need to really understand about them, and we're going to go into this in quite a bit more detail in terms of both what it is and why it is, but they have an untempered nature. They say what they think, they do what they feel. As a result, they can be quite inconsiderate and not understanding at all of other people or other people's feelings. And they do have issues around separation. And if we understand that, again, these are things that are part of who they are and where they need to be, we can be a little bit more patient with these particular characteristics that can concern us as adults, because we worry about these things. Oh my goodness, if they stay like this for the rest of their life, they're not going to have a very good life. But if we understand why it is the way it is, we'll be able to go along with it. Dr. Neufeld has pulled together a list of the personality profile. And so some of the things that we do know about these children is in that untemperedness. So by tempering, we mean that we're able to sort of see another perspective. We know that our 4-year-olds are not very good at seeing another perspective, but that's why they can believe in magic. That is why they're so sure of things, and they're absolutely certain, and they stay in that moment, and they just have this wonder in the world, which is really quite an amazing, magical thing for them. But they're also impulsive and unreliable. Many of them are, especially by the time they're 4 years old, they can tell us what the rules are. They can tell us how they're supposed to act, but oh my goodness. 2 seconds later, they are doing the opposite of what they promised. They are doing something that they should know better, because their intentions are easily eclipsed by the moment. And as a result, they're short-sighted and they're terrible at problem solving. They can figure out one part of it, but they can't figure out the other part of it. And they get themselves into all sorts of trouble. And they're also, as a result, have a hard time getting along with other people, because one thing is they're very sure about their point of view. Absolutely. That lady is fat as far as they're concerned. That's a truth they have to say. And they are very single-minded. And in terms of fairness, it really is, it's my piece of pie that's the littlest one. It's my piece of pie. And we sort of get concerned about that, and very self-centered on themselves. So this is sort of what we see. Lynne, I don't know if you want to just share a little bit about your thoughts when you saw this list.
Well, yeah, thank you, Eva. When I first encountered this list, I just began to laugh because I recognized it. And yet I had never said it or put it together into any kind of a framework. And Eva's original list of how preschoolers are delightful and joyous and so on, we see all that. And that is here in this list as well. However, the parts that are more difficult for adults for me, I can only speak for myself, it was much more difficult for me to know how to understand and deal with, we could call it egocentrism, which means that they are self-centered. It's their point of view. This is all part, and the temper tantrums and all these things that we as adults deal with young children. Not having a context for understanding that. And when I saw this, I just felt a huge sense of relief and like, oh, at last, it's been said out loud and there's a framework that holds it. I can understand this now.
Thanks, Lynne. So why are they that way? Well, one of the things that we pay attention very much to the way that they speak, to the kind of way that they explain the world, is they don't really have these mixed thoughts and these mixed feelings. They're not likely to sort of reflect on something, oh, on the one hand, on the other hand. They kind of go running forward. And that is because they can only pay attention to one thought or one emotion at a time. Well, why is that? Why can they only focus on one thing at a time? Many of you have had this conversation with a 4-year-old, but how do you think your friend, or how would you feel if your friend took your toy away? Oh, I would be so mad. Well, how do you think your friend feels? But he took my toy away. Oh, only one thought, only one emotion. And yet, if you talk to them much later when they aren't involved, they would be able to explain that we don't like toys being taken away. But in that moment, that one thought or that one emotion is actually tied to the development of the brain. Because we have many parts to our brain, and we have a part that we're very proud of as human beings, which is called the cortex, and particularly the prefrontal cortex, or the prefrontal lobe of our brain, which when it starts wiring together does allow us to have more than one, or more than one thought at a time, or more than one feeling at a time. But it has not yet, in the preschool years, has not yet started to make the connections together. And so it's like the child can only look here or look here. They can't look at them both. And that is something that comes a little bit later in their development. And so when they have an impulse, they're expressed. When they have they don't have a conflicting thought. It's eclipsed in that moment. Interesting thing is, it's not that these children don't have kindness in them towards another child. Absolutely. When they can be very kind. If you just watch 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds together, a child gets hurt, children will run over and try and comfort them. They're very kind. They have extreme kindness inside of them. But when their particular needs are not being met, at that moment, they cannot consider the other person's perspective yet. So when they think about the others, they can't hold on to themselves. And when they're thinking about themselves, they can't yet consider the other person, because that prefrontal cortex is not yet activated. And that doesn't happen until 5 to 7 years of age. It takes that much longer for things to work together for the child. So we can't expect them to actually be able to do this until that part of the brain starts to grow and develop.
And Eva, I just wanted to add in case this wasn't already obvious to you, which I'm sure you have already thought of, it's very difficult then when we're asking children to share. Because what's fair is what I want, right? We go back to that list. What I want, that's my perspective. That's what's fair. And there is a reason for that. We're getting to that. But part of the practice that we most often really engage in with children is teaching them how to share. We're really working against their natural tendencies. We'll talk about some of the ways that we work with that. Because it is important that we treat people in a class with consideration, but we're the ones that have to be considerate.
Yeah. We have to help them make it look as if, right? And until they're ready to. I mean, I think this is the thing, and Lynne and I have had many, many discussions about this material, and what really struck me when we were talking about it is that they have incredible capacity for caring. But at this stage of their life, it's not able to be manifest at the same time that they're worried about something that's happening to them. That will come when they're 5 to 7 years old. And many kindergarten teachers pride themselves on having taught children to care, when actually by the time they turn 6, it becomes much more natural for them. Now, there's another thing we have to understand is some people say, well, come on, can't we hurry this brain up? But it's meant to develop slowly, because there's a whole nother job that is being done at the same time. Because children, again, come into a world that they do not know, a world that they slowly need to learn to experience through, especially the first 5 to 6 years of their life. But as they are going through that world, the first job they have to do is figure out who they are. And so they need to fully experience their own emotions. That is why when they cry, they are so terribly sad. And when they're frustrated, they're so terribly upset. And when they're happy, they're so terribly joyful. Because each one of those emotions needs to be experienced in its fullness over and over and over again until it becomes a part of who they are. They need to develop their own preferences, what works for them, just as Lynne's son is found out that he loves to work with his hands. And it's something that is really part of who he is and how he's wired. The children need to develop their own thoughts. If they think it's daytime or if they think it's nighttime, they have their own reason for it. I don't know if any of you have ever had this discussion with a young one, but they will come up to you and say, "It's nighttime." And you go out and you see the sun is shining and you say, "No, honey, it's daytime." And they'll say, "No, it's nighttime." And then finally, eventually it kind of comes out because the moon is also up. And when the moon is up, it's nighttime. And they're starting they have their own thought. When the moon is up, it's nighttime. And so in this stage of their life, they have some very clear thoughts of how they see the world. And we need to give space for that. And so that's why that brain has not yet wired up, because the brain, it doesn't move the child to think of something else that might overwhelm what they're starting to develop in themselves, what they're starting to notice. And we call that the emergence of the tender new self. It takes time for that tender new self to become what it is, and it can't get confused by other thoughts. So the child's brain needs time to become oriented to the world and who they are. And they do this. To do this, they're present in the moment with their dominant thought or emotion, with no other thoughts coming in. And they're lost in this examination. And their brain just doesn't let more in than what they can handle. And interestingly enough, we talk about as adults learning to become mindful. But I think children are naturally, right, Lynne?
Yeah, they are in the present because they're trying to figure everything out, as Eva was saying. A story occurs to me. Do I have time to say this, Eva? Thank you. There was a woman telling a dream to a famous dream analyst in a class of people. No, sorry, got it wrong. The analyst was telling the dream of a woman who was not present to a class. And he said, the woman went to the moon. Hand goes up. You mean she dreamt she went to the moon? He continues, the woman went to the moon. You mean she dreamt she went? And finally, he said, there is no difference. What you're experiencing in the moment, the day and night distinction isn't in the brain yet. The moon is what makes it night. So the word moon and night go together. The experience that you're engaged in is what is true. Yeah. And for us to respect that, then we're beginning to sow the seeds of respect.
Yeah. So it's hard to hold space for that when we think we know better, but we really need to honor what that child is experiencing in that moment and work around some of the things that result from that, because sometimes it can affect other children.
Right.
So what they need from us is they actually need us to compensate for what is missing in them. So we need to accept that responsibility to keep them out of trouble rather than asking them to control their impulses. We need to keep them out of situations that are beyond their developmental level. And again, we talk about our 4 and our 5-year-olds, but we also know that in our school, we have some of our children who've been affected by trauma, whose brain is therefore, as a result, slower to develop. And we have a responsibility to not constantly put children back into situations that they can't handle yet. That's why I love Lynne's room, because her room is a place, it's a safe place for some of these older children who need that protection. But with our young ones, we need to constantly think about, is this too much for them to handle? Sometimes we need to kind of give them a little script so they can stay out of trouble, but realizing that they're just using that until they catch up with their development. And it's really about us providing for them so that we can keep them out of trouble. Main words that I often use with children: anticipate and prevent. Where do they get into trouble? How can I keep them out of trouble? What can I do? Oh my goodness, I forgot. I didn't leave time for this, or I didn't make it clear enough for that. I need to make it clear so they don't get into trouble. And when they get into trouble or difficulty or have a hard time, our job is to help them out instead of correcting them. And this sentence is going to come back over and over again. We have to stay patient and resist the urgency of teaching them a lesson, teaching them how to do things right, because things will change as the brain matures. Children will spontaneously around 6 to 7 years of age, spontaneously start to share because their brain is now ready for it. And we have to make sure that we stay with them until they're ready to do that.
Can I interject again, Eva?
Absolutely.
So there are two things that come to mind for me that we've said, and I wonder if we could give a little more example to. One is when they're thinking of themselves, they can't think of others, or when they're thinking of others, they can't think of themselves. Can't think of themselves. So some children are, when they want to share, they're no longer even conscious of what their own needs are. They are so sharing. So because I use sharing as an example of something we have to work with in new ways, I wanted to do the other side of the coin, because there is a generosity of giving everything away that can be in a young child and not considering what they need at all. The other comment I wanted to make was I wanted to speak to scripts. And what do we mean by that? I'm going to give an example from a 3-year-old. So in circle time, there was one little boy in my class who could not help himself. He was so he was unable to accept being part of a group and not being the center of attention. That's how I read it. I put him directly across from me and whispered into his ear sometime before the circle time, Aaron, you're going to sit right across from me. I will be able to see you. He wanted to sit beside me. I will be able to see you, and we're going to do the circle. You're going to help me with the, whatever it was, the cloth, the song, something. And then we'll sit by each other at lunch. And that did it. He was able, but I had to tell him almost daily for a while until it became part of what he understood. But that's what we mean by scripting. He couldn't do that on his own. He needed to actually have it spelled out for him, what was appropriate behavior.
Yeah. So when we're looking at our classroom culture, really it's about rhythm and order, about things happening in a certain way. And again, Lynne, you put your finger on it. When it's spring, it's time to plant. And when it's time to plant, you have a whole rhythm of things that happen to prepare your mind and your body and the soil for the planting. And I think this is very much, again, what we need to look at in terms of the daily place that we bring these children. And so obviously you all have your daily routines. I think, again, in discussion with Lena, what really struck to me was that the routine in and of itself is really, really important. And so we need to find ways in which to make that routine flow so the day just flows through. And one of the things that Lena uses a lot, which I think is absolutely beautiful, and we've talked a little bit about it, is just that every time there's a transition, how do we help children move? Because of course, if they're really focusing on play, then how do we get them to move into doing something else? And one of the wonderful ways of doing that are through songs. So Lena, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how you use that particular thing to move children from one thought another thought or from one activity to another activity.
Well, the saving grace is that they have one thought at a time. All right. So what we can use that to our advantage by bringing the thought of what is coming next to mind. And I know no better way to do it than to sing it. It's so much more restful for the adult than the way I used to direct, which was directing. I would find myself quite exhausted. But if I had a song, the song to begin Circle was a Pussycat song. There was a song, washing hands, being diapered or going to the potty. They were different songs. And they didn't necessarily talk about bodily functions, but they made sense in the context. Going outside, coming inside, actually getting dressed. We sang Deedle Deedle Dumpling, My Son John. Everything we did, welcome to the table. There was a child who I had from infancy, and when he first began to speak in the infant room, he actually said, welcome to the table, when he was hungry, because that's how he knew food was coming when we started to sing that song. The key is not so much that you have to go out and find songs. You already know songs. So either you have songs that address these various issues, or you have a little tune that comes to mind. You just change the words so that it makes sense for the transition that you're naming. But we sang our way through the day. Now, that's okay in a preschool room. I'm not so sure how you would do that in the upper grades, but the more it can happen, I think the easier it is on the culture of the class. Everybody hears it. It's much gentler than at least the way I was directing, and it's effective because it enters the brain in a completely different level. It appeals to the emotions. It draws them in.
Yes, and of course it's also very gentle and soft, and so it enhances the connection between the child and the adult as well, right? So that we want to connect with them. Yeah, Elena she has promised us that she will be developing and working on this. So once we have some of those links to one of our Neufeld Institute websites, we'll make sure to share that with you. So the other thing very much that is helpful with our children, especially because they don't have a brain to order their world necessarily in the way that we would like, is that we need to provide order in the classroom with each thing in its place, which really reassures them of what's happening and what's going on. And as a result of that, one of the things, again, in our discussions that really really leapt out at me was that for children to be able to understand where things go and how we need to organize things, we actually need to be spending time with them and helping them to care for the room. And then I'll just put these little things on here, the bullet points, and maybe you can just briefly talk to how you've used this with children.
There's a piece of this, which is if everything is where it always is, then the child never has to look. And since being lost or not knowing where they are and not knowing how they're going to manage is a huge part for a young child being in school, having order in that way is reassuring and shields their anxiety, lowers their anxiety. There's another way to look at it too, which is that this is the curriculum. And it's so wonderful to show respect. Well, you know this. To show respect for the environment and the room and how we care for things is in fact doing two purposes. Or perhaps three. You could call it a spiritual practice. Yeah. And it's also showing respect for what we have. And through that example, the child knows that respect is part of what they can expect from us as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very different thing, but I think we need to understand that sometimes less is more for children. Sometimes these basic things can be very helpful in the long term to give them the kind of characteristics that we want them to have. And I think sometimes...
By the way, there would be a song for each of these. In fact, when they came in from outside, we would sing, "Cobbler, cobbler, mend my shoe," as we brushed off everybody's shoe. They would just line up on that bench and their shoe up and so on. But this is it. We were being respectful. Yeah. And so there's a strong.
And it seems as if it's taking a lot of time. But the more I think about these little ones, I think we have to be so careful that our urgency doesn't get in the way of what it is that they actually need. And they need that space and that sense of safety. One of the things that Lynne and I found as we were talking was that every one of these slides, she and I could give a full 2-hour lecture and not repeat ourselves. So we're going to have to move along a little bit here. So we're now going to move into the next area, which is a huge concern for our children, because they do have a lot of worries around separation. Because again, without a strong attachment, without that deep roots, they cannot grow and develop. And so they have a fear of separation that really can be overwhelming and crippling. And I'm not sure that we truly understand how this worries them. Then they have this huge hunger for contact and connection that takes precedence over any other need. They instinctively know that without this strong, caring relationship with an adult who can be there, that they are really out at sea. And therefore they have a preoccupation with belonging. They want to belong. They want to be part of something. They want to be the same as other children. They want to be part of the group. They really want to belong. And it has an effect on their emotion and their behavior. And they are easily wounded to the quick by perceived signs of disapproval or not mattering. And again, our as we all know, our nonverbal communication can be 80% of a communication, and these little beings are very, very, very aware of that. So why do they have that? Well, it again is related to development, and some of you did attend to the session where I looked at Dr. Neufeld's roots of attachment, which actually takes 6 full years to fully develop. And so when our little ones come to us as 4-year-olds, some of them even 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 5 years old, those stages have not yet fully developed. And so therefore they feel, because when they have the deep roots of attachment, they can feel connected to the people that are their parents, that are their caregivers, that take care of them, and they can tolerate being apart from them. But when they're still in the developmental stage of that, they still feel quite fragile. And so it leaves them particularly sensitive and vulnerable to any real and perceived separations. And it doesn't take much for them to feel as if, maybe this means you aren't going to be taking care of me. And so they have strong emotions. They have emotions of alarm. They get really worried. Some of them get really frustrated. Some of them really want to please us. And these are all very strong emotions that we know are experienced one at a time. And the child can erupt in difficult behavior, more the alarm and the frustration than the pursuit, but sometimes the pursuit as well. Lynne, you were talking about that little boy that really wanted you to pay attention to him. He was in full pursuit. He couldn't tolerate someone sitting beside you because he thought that meant you didn't care about him. And you understood that his behavior wasn't because he was being insensitive to the other children, but because he needed to be reassured that you still cared for him, even though he wasn't sitting beside you. Yeah. And so we need to be the agents of attachment, right? So that we can help them to gain these deeper attachment levels. And by answering the most crucial question that every little child constantly asks, who is taking care of me? Who is taking care of me? And our response to that is really in the dailiness of what we do, in greeting them warmly, giving them a sense of significance, noticing something about them, in creating this calm, orderly, rhythmic environment. I know that Valerie, you've talked about in your class Osasun, how there would be quiet music, how there would be some kind of a lovely odor in the classroom, how there would be just this sense of order, rhythmical in the sense of every day has its rhythm, every season has its rhythm. And then even when we need to get children to listen to or follow us, that we adopt a playful attitude when it is appropriate. And then you had a lovely example of how you pull together some of your little ones.
All right. Well, this is with little children. Probably 4-year-old and 5-year-old would be the last time I'd do this. But if someone is running around the room, which often happened in childcare, that when they felt just disjointed from what was going on, I joined them, but I turned it into galloping, galloping, here we go, off to the meadow, don't be slow. And I had my reins or whatever. And pretty soon the whole room would be galloping. And then when I felt that we were ready, I just said, all done. So I took the lead and helped bring calm to the situation. And that's what I mean about playful. You can do it all the time in any situation. You can add a little something.
Yeah. And the other children didn't realize, because normally what we do is we want to correct that child, and that would then disrupt the flow of the other children, whereas the other children could join into the playfulness, and it felt fun for them. They didn't know why you were doing it, but they liked it, right? Yeah. So we need to build this sense of connection through lots of smiling, lots of gentleness of speech, this constant lively interest in the child, understanding that he needed to move. And so we are going to help him with that movement. Being the leader who is in charge and caring. So Lena took charge of that situation. She made sure that she got them to where they needed to be, which was to be in a calmer state, but in a caring kind of a way. And then, of course, sometimes when that emotion goes over the top, really respecting where they're at with that emotion, because some of the things that we're talking about aren't going to work with every child. Some of them are going to move a little bit further along because we haven't quite caught onto where they are. Our basic line is we want to provide this unconditional invitation to exist in our presence. We will take care of you. And of course, when emotions are not going well, when things are not going well and these emotions are high, well, first of all, we need to assume responsibility for maintaining a caring relationship. And this is going to come up over and over again in every one of the things that we're going to suggest to you. And I'll just give you the quick list, and then we'll go into how these things can happen. So we are going to try and come alongside their emotional experience. We're going to recognize and understand that emotion takes precedence over reason. We're going to treat the incident as an accident. We're going to resist the urge to constantly teach a lesson. And we're going to help them find a way through, and also move them to grieve some of the things that they cannot change, because it's tough being a little kid. So how do we assume this responsibility? Well, first of all, we want to come alongside their emotional experience. Get close to them. Again, I know when you have a large group of children, how do I do this? But again, it's just in through little signs and gestures. I'm sorry things aren't working for you. Oh, you have a lot of hits in you today. That frustration needs to come out. Well, that's not the way, but here, let me help you. This is just about recognizing that there is a big emotion in a child, and that we recognize it, and we're going to come alongside it and help them with it. We build this culture of safety in the classroom by caring for the child, but also showing the group how we deal with emotion. It's rare that these little ones can actually voice these things, but I've had slightly older children actually say to a teacher, how can you always be so kind when sometimes I do things you don't like? But just that gentleness, that coming alongside, that naming it, that recognizing it, makes all of the children feel as if, well, if I run into that kind of trouble, my teacher's going to take care of me as well. And then we help them out instead of trying to correct them. And we treat the incident as an accident. You didn't mean to hit your friend. It can look very purposeful, but our attitude is they just couldn't help themselves at this moment in time. We're going to understand that and come alongside. We're going to work with it. We're going to protect the other children, but we never see it as being done willfully or on purpose, but rather that they were overwhelmed by an emotion in that moment. We're going to not try and talk them out of what it is that's going emotionally with them. For example, if the child's upset because their mom or dad has left them at school, we have a tendency to want to kind of take that away. Oh, no, you're okay. Oh, don't cry. Mommy will be back. We're basically trying to talk them out of how they are feeling. And rather, what we need to be saying is, oh, you don't like it when mommy leaves. It's hard when daddy goes. You don't want to be left today, and come alongside the emotion. And of course, always letting them know, I'm going to be here to care for you. Lynne, you had another couple of examples of how sometimes as adults we tend to want to talk children out of their emotions.
Yes. Well, these are the separation. This one is so clearly separation. It's such an important one that we wanted to highlight that one first. But I thought of something else today is when a child is building with blocks, let us say, doing something that they care deeply about, and somebody else comes and knocks it down. And if we come alongside that, we would just be with them in their sadness about it. Often what the tendency is, though, is to say, oh, you can build it again. This is what I call combating emotion with reason, right? Instead of staying with the feeling until it has passed. And then letting them figure out that they can build it again.
Yeah. Yeah, so many times they don't actually want us to fix something. They just want us to know. Even when children come to us and say, Miss, he was being mean to me. It's really about, do you understand how that makes me feel? And I know a teacher who basically would only just come alongside that and not try and fix what the other child did, but just take care of the child. Oh, that hurt your feelings. You don't like it when he talks to you like that. And these were slightly older children, and they and at the end she would say, do you want me to say something to the other child? Most of the time the children say no, because all they wanted was to know that she cared about what was going on inside of them when someone said something hurtful.
Yeah.
Really, it's about listening with our heart and respecting the emotional experience of the child. That is what will help them move to the next stage of their development. We don't need to teach that to them. And again, we have such an urge to teach a lesson. Of course, that's what we were hired to do. Oh, I got to teach them how to get along. I've got to teach them how to share. I've got to teach them how to be kind to their friends. I've got to teach them this and teach them that. But actually, it will grow in them, just like the sharing will grow. And sadly, when we are trying to teach them, now we're thinking, oh my goodness, this isn't acceptable. I have to tell them what to do instead. And even if we've come alongside the emotion first, when we start correcting them, for many children, they actually sense that as a disapproval of who they are. And what we have to understand is we need to recognize that right in this moment in time, they cannot see the world in another way. The other thing we need to remember as well, and this goes back to the development of their prefrontal cortex, is that they truly cannot yet understand that if you are frustrated with them or disapprove of them or think they need to do something differently, that you can still love them. I mean, even as adults, many of us still have a hard time with that. But for a little child, when you're not happy with them or where you're trying to fix them, all they can think of, and I remember I have this wonderful, wonderful kindergarten teacher. He was a great, big, strong, big, tall man, 6 foot, the most gentle giant, And I saw when he was correcting the children and trying to teach them, no, honey, remember to use your hands. Remember how many I've told you, use your words, not your hands. I was observing him and I could see the little kids just looking up at him. And I just saw in their eyes, all they were thinking is, do you still love me? Do you still love me? They just couldn't even process what he was saying in that moment because they are in the moment emotionally. And so again, we need to stay patient and resist the urgency of trying to teach them things, because things will change as the brain matures. I think we had another example here, or?
Oh, I was going to say something about the muddy mittens. I mean, if a child gets terribly upset, I had a child who had a particular pair of mittens that they loved, and then of course also wanted to play in the mud, and then was upset that the mittens were dirty. And we just stayed in sadness, took the mittens off, eventually, and that kind of thing. But I resisted saying, well, if you hadn't, or if you had taken them off before you played, none of that. So those kinds of lessons, where it's really about sort of saying, I told you so, or something akin to that a little bit.
Yeah. It's so hard because we want our children not to get into trouble. But what's more,
bad. Yeah. We don't want them to feel bad.
Yeah. So we need to help them find a way through if that's possible. Yes, sometimes if they want to hit other children, we need to give them something else to hit, something else to do, something else to stomp it out. We need to give them alternatives, absolutely, with fully recognizing what's happening with them. And of course, for those of you that have attended other sessions with me, for many of our young children, they need to work through grief. They need to grieve what cannot be changed, and we need to hold them in their sadness and their tears, again, without doing a lot of talking. Humming. I often say that if you have an urge to speak, try and use that urge in another way, like just, or even just, a little song or just something so that you don't interfere with that emotional moment of sadness before the child is ready to come up and move on and move forward. Again, one of the biggest challenges we have in many of our classrooms is we don't have enough adults who have the time and the space to welcome the tears. I wish every early childhood education classroom had one person whose job it was, if they could, to actually be there for the tears, and we would have many people. And right now, of course, in this day and age, we need places for our adults to be crying as well, because so much is going on. And we need to generously provide more proximity and more help than the child is actually asking for. And very much around the whole issue of physical care, and with little ones about getting dressed, is sometimes thinking about, I know that if you have 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 of them and they're all trying to get dressed, you can't go and help everyone, but at least once in a while to go to the child and actually help them before they ask. And I know some of you are going to be thinking, won't that make them just want us to dress them all the time? But actually, Lynne, do you want to just...
Well, it's an interesting paradox, Eva. Everyone, by taking the times of bodily care as times when we give our attention to a child. Children understand that time and attention equals caring, right? So when we do that at times that they actually need us, like getting dressed, or bodily care, I call it, could be many things, depends on the age, that will fill them up emotionally and allow them to venture forth more, feeling secure and cared about. And in a way, it brings them to independence faster. They take great pride. Of course, children do take great pride in knowing how to dress themselves. And if they are struggling, there's probably 2 reasons. One is that they need a little bit of our time and attention, and the other is that they really don't know how to do it.
Yeah. So we want to avoid some discipline practices, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but these are things, sadly, that we are often recommended for us to do with children, and especially with our little ones. And there are some very, very good reasons why we need to find another way through. And I will be doing a whole session on how to manage and put order, discipline, so to speak, because discipline isn't about correction. Discipline is about maintaining order. But things like time out or consequences by which we take away something that the child is attached to so that they will learn their lesson, or even reward systems, we make them earn certain things by good behavior, or red light and red, orange, and green light situations where we alert them to how they're supposed to be behaving, or using the agenda at the end of the day, whether they've had a red day or a green day or an orange day, or any other ways that we can do. I've heard people using storm clouds and sunshine or whatever, but all of these things basically say to a child that they have to earn our attention and our attachment. Now, first of all, we have to understand that prior to 5 years of age, they don't even have the brain capacity to understand why you're doing those things. It really makes no sense to them whatsoever. Even if we use, often people will say, well, I have a thinking chair in my kindergarten classroom. A 4-year-old cannot think about his behavior or reflect upon his behavior because that prefrontal cortex is not there. And so it might well be that the child will come afterwards and say, please, miss, I want to be good. but that wasn't a reflection. That's just their desire to reestablish a relationship with us. They haven't thought things through. And so we really aren't helping them whatsoever to think things through or develop that prefrontal cortex, because they are not ready yet to do that. And what they experience is, to get the teacher's happy face, to get the teacher's smile, I have to earn a star. And so they see good behavior. They see the attachment as conditional, and it puts them into separation alarm. And for the agenda, imagine how horrible it feels to a child to have to bring home a stormy cloud, which will then make mommy or daddy unhappy. It really breaks that relationship with the parent and causes all sorts of problems. So there have to be, and there are other ways. And many of the things that we've already recommended until now will actually help children to get through their day, in a way that doesn't hurt other children or that allows us to continue. We can help children get through their day without doing these kinds of things, which actually now, in my understanding, make things worse for our little children. What our little children need from us is unconditional attachment. They're not meant to work for our smile or for our pleasure in them by earning a star or a green light. So by proving that they can share or do all these things, that's not how they're meant to work at all. Because when they're working for that attachment, they're actually not resting. And when they're resting, their brain isn't growing. We need to give this to them in a way that lets them know, I will take care of you no matter what. One of the kind of ways of saying this is that we provide more attachment, kindness, and caring when behavior is actually at its worst. We understand, and this little one, and some of you have seen the 3 pictures that go with this. This is a little grandson. He was not happy that his grandfather hadn't seen him for a while. And in the first picture, he's very pouty. And in the second picture, he's still pretty pouty. His grandfather didn't take that personally. His grandfather knew, this little guy needs more of me. He doesn't need me to correct him. He doesn't need his mother to say, come on, honey, give your grandfather a kiss. No, this grandfather intuitively knew, I just need to be there. I'm going to be at his level. I'm going to put my arm around him. And the third picture, of course, is this little one sleeping on his grandfather's lap. The grandfather provided more than the child needed, because that is what brought the child into his care and allowed the child to rest. And the last thing want to just say here a little bit is about bridging, which means basically sometimes there are separations. Sometimes we do disapprove of children. Sometimes we have to say things to get things back into order in the classroom. Sometimes we break that relationship. We know that. We're human beings. There's no way that we can always be perfect. And so one of the concepts that Dr. Neufeld shares to us is this idea of bridging, of just repairing, putting the emphasis on when we're back together again. So when facing separation, we want to preserve the connection by drawing attention to what stays the same or to the next point of contact. And so how do we do that in the classroom? How can we do that? Well, if there's been an emotional separation, if we've, our disapproval raised to the front and we gave the child that look, or we had to speak, sternly to them because they were causing more disruption than we felt the other children need to handle. And so there was an incident. We need to constantly reassure children. This is called bridging. Just say to them, oh, we'll read a book together when you get back. You know what? You can sit at me with circle time. And what we're saying to the child is, the next time we get together, I will still take care of you. When there's been a physical separation, at the end of the day, and especially some of you have mentioned that some of your children really count on you being there. So we give them something to look forward to. I'm looking forward to having morning snack together. And so the child looks forward to when they come back into us. Or if the teacher has to be away, and again, this is something that Lynne has used with her children, is something is waiting on the shelf until I get back, a physical sign to the child that you will return. I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that one.
Well, that says it.
Yeah. So, and again, it's a visual sign to the child. I'm not forgetting about you. I'm not disappearing. I'm going to come back and get my scarf. I'm going to come back and get my cup. I'm going to come back and get my sweater. And so when children look around the classroom and are missing us because we are not there, they see a sign of our caring. And that's really important. It reassures and calms these children down and will make it easier for them to get through their day. It will reassure them that we will continue to care for them. What do these children need from us? Well, we need to compensate for this brain that is developing slowly and that doesn't allow them to do all the things that we would love them to be able to do right now. So we have to compensate for that. When they get into difficulty, we're going to help them out, helping them out rather than trying to correct them. We are going to assume responsibility for the relationship when they're having a hard time getting along with another little 4-year-old that acts the same way that they do. We're just going to do gentle little things to kind of make the day go more smoothly for them. When things don't work well, we're going to bridge what divides. We're going to generously provide more proximity and more help than the child is asking for, because that will give them that reassurance that we will be there for them, and to provide an unconditional invitation to exist in our presence, thus fulfilling their attachment hunger. Because when they are not easy to care for, that is when they need us the most. We need to remember that all development begins with attachment. So sing, dance, emote, be playful, provide comfort, be generous, forgive easily. And that's not only forgiving the child, but forgiving ourselves. Feel your sadness and have faith in nature's plan. There is a reason for why they are the way that they are. Whew. There we are.
Thank you so much, Eva.
Well, thank you. It was a wonderful experience for me to be guided by you in the eyes that you have towards these little ones. Yeah.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Lynne. Now I would like to ask if Sarah or Lynne has something to talk about.
Well, I'm sure Lynne will have plenty to say. I'll go ahead. I'm amazed with all this, like usual, and help me thinking about those little ones we have under our care, or we observe them acting weird sometimes, but and they are wonderful. They amaze me every time how curious they are, and we need to do our best. And for some reason, I look at the theory. I think it's so well done. Well, it's very evaluate. You know, the science we have right now to understand what doesn't fit right in. Sometimes it's out the society doesn't evaluate them as well. We are on a computer. We don't, for some reason, we are detached. We're disconnected from what happened in our little one's emotion. So we see a lot of anxiety. So we kind of lost a connection sometimes, not always, and we have to rebuild that. We have to work really hard and find the best practice, and then think and reflect how we can do better and how we can share like those success story and those word of wisdom that we just heard. And it's and when you think about it, it's quite simple. We had the recipe 100 years ago, the way we treat our children. They are sacred. They are the most precious thing that we have, and we can do whatever, like everything for them. We need to do everything for them. So we have to go back with this theory and the best practice and all our heart and our knowledge and capacity to do our best to raise the next 7 generation. So they are the one who's going to change things, I think. So just thank you for all those nice words. And then I think we'll see more of Lena and her practice and then ideas, and then just the cup and scarf thing, you know, makes me, I want to try that. I will with the little one I have around me. So just thank you so much.
Okay, so I just want to say that this was an amazing workshop. all the slides, the information. I can't wait to see it again on the video because, it's a lot of information, but so much, what I like about it is that you're given the practical stuff to do. And it's always coming from that love and beautiful heart. When the children are developing in the womb, they're feeling that security. If the mom's living, a good, healthy life and lifestyle. So when the baby's in the womb, it's feeling that safety and that connection and that beauty and surrounded by that sacred water. And then when they come out, there's that scream and they're crying and, some say that, well, they don't really, it's fearful to come out of that place. And so in our culture, we have our cradle board. And, so right away it's swaddling that child so that the body is feeling safe and secure and tight. And it allows for the other senses to start developing along with the brain. So they're using their eyes a lot, to observe the mom and the family and the interactions there. They're developing the sense of the sound and, developing, the beauty of the sounds of family and outside and nature and all of that sense of smell. And then, with that, they start their cooing, they start with their verbalization of, trying to be a part of with that sacred voice. And then as they grow older, then they start now moving the body. So the in our culture, the cradle board was kind of like the first, I'm not going to say discipline, but it's being more aware and developing those senses before you start exploring and moving your body around. And I know in some cultures, not so much in ours, but I remember we had a ceremony here in my yard because we had a teepee, and it was the Cree people that came, and their ceremony, they said that their babies don't touch the earth until they're able to walk. And so it was amazing to see, that culture and what they do. And they dress them in their little clothes, and the boy brings the goose around the fire with his little bow and arrow. And the little girl, has her basket of her sewing and material, and the roles are already developing, as with ceremony and the sacredness, when they're little. And, in our ceremonies for us, when we do the naming, boys get to walk, we walk the baby boys across from one fire to the other in the longhouse because they're the ones that are going to be traveling, and the names are selected, based on, nature and what was happening at the time of birth. So there's so much dynamics involved in, starting to teach our babies right from the womb on roles, responsibility, and discipline and care. And I know the last time we met, I talked about down fending and the importance there, of that protection and, the softest cattails surrounding them and protecting them. And so, but times have changed. Times have changed, and it's good now that these memories for us are coming back, and more families now are bringing back the ways of raising our children. But I just like what you're sharing is that we give them more. We give them more than they're asking for, or like they're not consciously wanting it, but they're wanting it. I liked one part where you were talking about, the daily routines and engaging them in the care of the room. And I remember reading somewhere that, like today now, parents come home, they're busy. They work, they get the child from daycare. It's like, all right, give them something to be busy while I can prepare supper. Mm-hmm. But really, it's about engaging them right away and giving them something they can do at that developmental level. Because when we're putting them on the side, we're telling them that, well, you really don't belong right now. You don't belong right now because I'm going to do it and you're there. So it's like, just bringing them and giving them, if they can cut, carrots. I mean, of course they're using a knife, but it depends if it's cutting bread or something, for a bread pudding or something, so it's involving them in that daily experience. So they know right away that attachment, especially around food. I mean, a lot of people, celebration is always about food, and food is so critical in culture and raising our children. So anyway, I mean, we're all born to want to help. You see them in class, they want to help, they want to do something to be part of. And so it was just, I really, really enjoyed it. And just the methods, nowhere did it say yelling. Raising your voice.
You left that out, right?
And that's always our first. Sometimes, when we're looking at best practices, it's not a best practice for them. Sometimes it's our best practice because, we only do what we know and what we've practiced. But as soon as you yell, it scares the spirit of the child.
Spirit, yes.
And already there's that alarm and what that kind of thing. And so it's just it's really really enjoyed this. And
thank you. I love your phrase, Lynne. I'm taking it. You don't belong right now. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. That's separation, right? You don't belong right now. And we know the yearning in a child is to belong. Mm-hmm. The need, the yearning, the deepest yearning. Beautiful. Thank you.
Well, go ahead, Hel.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted, the other comment I wanted to make, Lynne, which again, just how it dovetailed together beautifully, because you said you have your songs for the garden and for spring, right? And just how, again, naturally in your culture, songs are a way of helping with transitions and recognizing things. And so, again, I think this is just another way of bringing that. It's not necessarily a cultural practice, but of just using the gentleness of songs to teach, right? The gentleness of songs to guide. I just loved that, and I'm really looking forward. I don't know quite, Lena, how you're planning to do this, but I think you are planning to record some songs and to just give some more examples of that, and it will be on one of the Neufeld Institute websites, and so we will definitely make that available to people, because I know for me this would be something I'd have to kind of practice. But somebody, by the way, Lena, just to let you know, I think it was Cynthia. She said, "Now I've got the Barney cleanup song in my head."
Right on, Cynthia.
But the beauty of it, as you were saying, is that you can use any song that you like yourself and just change the words to it, right? So whatever's going to come easily, you don't have to learn something new. You just incorporate that in.
That'd be a fun workshop, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So it's lovely that there can be this dovetailing together.
Yeah, so we have a few more minutes. Maybe, I don't know if some people have some comments or question, so they can write it down in the chat box. Do not hesitate to ask some question. And I also want to tell you that all of us will be back next Wednesday for our time to share. So it will be time to discuss about what's been said. And Lena, you will be there, right? So So since it's our time to integrate theory, maybe you will have time to sing a song for us and do a few things.
Love to.
Yeah, just to let you know, Lena, in our time to share, we have everybody can activate their cameras, and so you get to see faces.
Yeah.
Yes, it's much. But we just found when we're recording that it's easier if we limit.
Absolutely. Great. That would be wonderful.
Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm really happy that you were there, and hopefully to see you next Wednesday. Next Wednesday. And so see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.